Welcome to Your Journey. I'm your host, Chuck Lewis, and we got a special guest with us today, Dr. Stephon Fuqua. What's going on, man?
What's up, Chuck Lou? Man, it's good to see you, boss.
Man, it's good to see you as well, man. How's everything going? Obviously, we're in this pandemic, dealing with COVID-19, adjusting to this new normal way of living. How have you been adjusting with everything, with all the changes and everything going on in our society?
Man, it's been just like, I imagine just like everybody else, man, just trying to play it day by day. You know, I was able to move home when we got the stay-at-home order, and school was put virtually, was able to move back to Cleveland and spend some quality time with my folks, work, and all that. So it's on the bright side of things, it's been positive because I haven't been to Cleveland this long since I left for college, you know what I mean? So now it's like, I'm spending some really good time talking to my dad and the things that I missed being away for so long. So it's been good, although it is very different. It is very different. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, like you work in the same industry as me, and so sometimes you don't get that opportunity to spend time with your family. But having that time to spend with your family has been key. It's been clutch because you have all the time in the world to spend with them. You don't necessarily have to worry about driving into work. Now you still got to work online, so that's been a little bit of a challenge. But having that family time is key, like you said. Well, let's get right into it, man. So talk about what it was like growing up in Houston, Texas.
Yeah, Houston, I grew up on the northwest side of Houston, Spring area, if anybody's familiar with it. It was before Houston was as booming as it is now. So it was kind of little bit country, but not really. Some city, some country was like just starting to develop. But no, it was great. I mean, that's where like up until 12 years old, that was my childhood, playing back in the day when you could play outside, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where you could ride your bikes and stuff like that. It was good. It was fun. Went to obviously born there, went to Clark Elementary out there, grew up with my friends my whole life, and then started middle school there before moving to Cleveland. So it was a great city. I loved the area. Obviously it was good. I lived in an area that was pretty nice. Middle class. But my mom, who was the breadwinner, it was probably, who was it? I had two brothers, a sister, and then their kids, which ended up being about four kids. And myself, we all lived in the same house. We all grew up in the same house. So we had a close family, obviously, but we all grew up in the same household.
Yeah, so you talk about moving to Cleveland at the age of 12. Talk about that transition. So you go from this warm weather to this cold weather. Talk about what that transition was like for you at the age of 12.
Yeah, so every summer I used to go visit my dad in Cleveland. So I was in the city. We lived in the Glenville area. It was off 105 in St. Clair, if anybody knows Cleveland. But it's in the neighborhood. It's nice. So when I moved to Cleveland, my dad actually, we actually moved to the suburbs at first. My dad wanted me to go, grow up in a nice area, that type of stuff, had good experience. And I think some of it had to do with my mom not wanting me to be in the neighborhood. So she kind of forced my dad's hand on that. So for a year, we lived in Lakewood, which is a suburb of Cleveland. And it was a culture shock, and because it was all white, where Houston is very multicultural. You know what I mean? It's from every walk of life, you see people in Houston. Then when you go to a place like Lakewood, it's all white. And moving from the south to the north, when you're dealing with race, it's very different. North, Midwest, very covert. You wouldn't know that you were being discriminated against, because it's very like hidden, you know what I'm saying? Where in the South, it's very much in your face and you can see it, but it was a challenge. It was the first time I kind of got into sports too, but it was a challenge. Then when we moved back to the neighborhood, back to the Glenville area, we actually lived in the Huff area, so 82nd between Euclid and Chester, kind of like by Cleveland Clinic. But I was able to go to Glenville because I wasn't going to go to any high school other than the one that my dad went to. My dad went to Glenville. So I wanted to go to Glenville especially. So that then was like the exact opposite of Lakewood because it was all black. It was all black neighborhood. You know, it was in the hood, all black high school. We had no white students. We had a few white teachers, but it was night and day. You know what I mean? To compare to what I was raised around, and then what was, you know, what my introduction to Cleveland was when I moved to the suburbs. So it was like night and day. But it was a good experience though. It ended up being a good experience. Yeah.
So you talk about moving to Glenville and you attend Glenville High School. What was your experience like there as a student?
So my first year at Glenville, I was still straight from Houston, Texas. Like you could tell, I wore Fila's and Reeboks and K Swiss, and like I was getting roasted every day because you know in the Midwest they ain't held just like that. That was back when like Inichi and like you know Fat Farm and you know like all that stuff was popping. So I'm going up there and I'm looking like, where is he from? He's straight country. I think I even had a leather jacket or leather shirt or something crazy I wore on my first day. You know how you lay your clothes out the first day? I'm about to kill it. You know what I'm saying? Then I go to school and I get roasted. It's so bad. So, but you know, it was cool because my dad went to high school again. My dad went to Glenville High School too back in the 70s. And he went to high school with Ted Ginn. Coach Ginn was a year younger than him, but they knew each other, and so I was able to connect with Coach Ginn. And then Coach Ginn obviously had Ted Ginn, his son, Ted Ginn Jr. And I was like, oh, okay, this, you know, maybe we can relate, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, hey, what's up, little Ted? Like, I'm Fuqua. He's like, all right, what's up, dude? Like, go somewhere. But then like guys like Pierre Woods, guy who ended up getting signed to Michigan. He played at Michigan. Darius Hiley, who we call Superman. Them guys were athletes, and I wasn't an athlete, but those were the guys who and Troy Smith, who actually transferred into Glenville the same time I did. He came from a private school on the west side of the suburb. But they all kind of took me under their wing a little bit because I was from out of town. It was like written all over my face, you know, like you're not from here. But it was rough that first year, and then I started to get used to like how things went at Glenville and started to get to know some people and stuff like that. So it was an interesting transition, definitely different, but I felt like if I got through it, if I got through the Jones, and I can survive, you know what I'm saying?
Nah, man. I mean, back in that era, man, I mean, style was everything. You know,
yeah.
This era is more about being an individual. You can wear what you want. You know, in this era, you can wear Vans or you can wear Jordans. You know, in that era, it was strictly one way to dress. It was the urban way to dress. So if you wasn't dressed like all the guys from your neighborhood, it was a problem. Right. So you was going to get roasted like you talked about. Right. But you've been an athlete your whole life, but actually in the 9th grade, you didn't play any sports. And you actually were in the marching band. So when did you develop that passion for music?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I always played recreational. Like I grew up, I mean, obviously like I was, you know, we just like anybody, we grew up playing on the playground or whatever. Then every summer when I used to come visit my dad, like I used to travel the east side of Cleveland to the Rex because Cleveland is known for having recreation centers, community centers, which have indoor, outdoor courts. Mm-hmm. And, you know, my dad used to play with me. So he used to make me play with the older guys. Like I couldn't play with my age. So I'm like, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I'm playing with like high school guys. And we in like, you know, right off St. Clair, we in DuPont, we in, we're in like the neighborhood and they're ballers, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm getting thrown around. And that's where I started to really get my competitive nature, like tenacity. Like I'm not gonna let them beat me type stuff. And so, but my mom, she wouldn't let me play sports. She was like, no sports. And so, coming to Cleveland was like my outlet. That's when my dad kind of got me in rec leagues and stuff like that, or pickup games. And so when I finally moved to Cleveland, my dad was like, he wanted me to focus on my academics first. And when I was in the suburbs, it was like, I wanted to play, but I wasn't as passionate because I didn't feel like, you know, I mean, would have been the only black kid on the team. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do all that. But I played a little bit, played some organized sports in the suburbs. And then what I really did was get to know, I had a music teacher in middle school who told me, like, you should try this. And, in middle school, you got to choose, like,
Yeah, you got to
whatever
pick one.
track. Yeah, like choir or music or something like that. And I chose music. So I learned a little bit of music, learned like brass instruments, trombone, trumpet, drums a little bit, bass clef, all of that. And I learned, and I wasn't, and I started to teach myself, like, how to hear music and play it.
Wow.
So I thought I was okay, I thought I could do something with it, But when I got to Glenville, I said, I want to keep with the music, I want to stay, but their music program wasn't very good. I mean, obviously, like, you go to a neighborhood school, the funding is very limited. So we had like 6 people in the band, you know what I mean? And I got there mid-year, so it was in the spring, so it was before any athletics, like any football season, but I was practicing with the band, and I was the only non-percussion person in the band, right? Because, you go to a black school, everybody knows how to play the snare drum and all that stuff. And I'm the only one with the instrument in my hand that's not a drum. So that's kind of where I was. I want to just keep it going and learn it. But, that was about it for me in terms of music.
Yeah. No, man, that's a great story, man. Most people don't realize that you actually started out, playing, in the band. But you do get a chance to get into sports in your junior year. You start out running track. What made you go out for the team?
So I started running cross country. So like so I begged my dad. I was like, Dad, I proved to him my freshman year I had good grades. And I was like, man, just let me do something. He said, I'm not gonna let you play football. I'm not gonna. And keep in mind, like, I hadn't played organized sport. Like rec league, it was my only experience with like running plays in basketball. But in football, I had never put on a helmet. I had never ran anything. You know what I mean? Like outside of, in elementary school, you had like the last day of school was like that field day. Where you have events. Mm-hmm. That was it. So I didn't play organized sport. I didn't play AAU or nothing like that. So he was like, okay, you proved yourself. I told you when we moved here, I wanted you to focus on academics. You've done well, right? So he said, I'm going to let you run cross country. Now, I've talked to him now. I'm like, why'd you let me play? He said, I thought by making you run cross country, I could get all of that desire out of you. Because cross country, you run 3 miles. Maybe you'll get tired of it or quit and not want to do it. Well, obviously, I wanted to like be the best cross-country runner, even though I was the absolute slowest out there. Yeah. But I was like, I'm going to just do this for myself. I'm going to get better. And then when track season came around, he was like, okay, I'll let you run track. So my 10th grade year was my first experience ever running track, like track meets and stuff like that. Like I didn't even know how to get in blocks or anything. So I'm like fresh, I'm like green, and I'll go out there, and I think it's like the first meet of the season. This is when the coaches like try to figure out who's fast, who's not. So they kind of put you in a bunch of different things, and I'm thinking I'm a sprinter, right? Now I'm from Texas, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I'm about to show some people some stuff, you know what I mean? So again, put me in the 200. A couple other races, but he put me in the 200, and that was one of the first races I had. I'm nervous as I'll get out. But I'm like, nobody from Ohio gonna beat me. I'm from Texas. I've always been fast. I mean, check my tape from field day back in elementary school. I'm the man, you know what I'm saying? So I get out there and I run. I come in dead last. I get smoked. And I'm like, I'll get my head knocked off. Now, I'm gonna tell you, I ran indoor. We had a first meets indoor because it's cold. I ran like a 26 in the 200, which is god awful slow. You know what I mean? Everybody knows that who runs track. So that was my year for the most part. Now I didn't quit. I kept going, I was still slow the whole year, slow as on the team. But I'm like, I'm gonna keep doing this. And so that was my sophomore year. That's where I got with it. So
Okay. So like in your senior year, you actually decided to go out for the football team, what you ended up doing at the collegiate level. You had instant success. How did that all come about for you?
Yeah. So fast forward now, we going into now junior year, senior year, and I get better as a track athlete. I run my dad is like, you know what? I'm not letting you play football. So I ran cross country again. It was my second year running. I'm like, okay, I'll go out here and do it. Got a little faster. Junior year track, got a little faster. Actually got on some relays. Because keep in mind too, and I should have provided some context. Keep in mind too that I'm at a school that is known for track. Like they have guys. It's not like, okay, you can run a little faster now. Now you're made the 18. They have the 18. You know what I'm saying? In the 4x1 is like running 40 point. You know, they got dudes running 10-6, 10-7, you know, and then
National
the B
contender.
team.
Yeah,
right. Like, no, I'm talking about like, and I should have said it, my sophomore year, we took 4 dudes to nationals in North Carolina to run against Karan Clement, Xavier Carter, like guys who are Olympians now. We took guys down there to compete against them. Now, we only had one guy winning the open race, Ted Ginn Jr. He ran the hurdles. He was the fastest in the country. But then we had our relays, which were respectable. So I'm just like the guy holding the bags. You know, I'm just allowed to go as like, y'all need some water, you know what I mean? And then my junior year, and then like you got those dudes that when we're getting ready for state or regional, state, nationals, I'm the guy that Coach Ginn puts, like if they're practicing 200s, repeat 200s, Coach Ginn puts me at 150 so they could chase me, right? Like I'm the rabbit, you know what I'm saying? So he's like shoot the gun, so I go, blow the whistle, so I go, and then he blows the whistle twice so they could chase me down. So that's my experience with the team as a sophomore year. Junior year, I'm like, I'm not finna be the rabbit. I'm not gonna be the rabbit again this year. Yeah. But I was still slow. Now I got respectable, so I made it onto the 4x1. Right, we competed, went to nationals, competed, but I still didn't make it in the open. Still didn't make it in the 4x2, 4x4. I was just like that. We know we're not gonna lose the race if he's in. You know what I mean? So then my senior year, so now Dad is like giving in. He said, okay. Plus, Coach Ginn's talking to him, and now I'm thinking about colleges. Like, we got to figure out how to get into school. So my dad finally lets me play football. Senior year, keep in mind, it's the first time I've ever strapped up a helmet, put on pads. Like, I didn't know if I was supposed to wear a cup. If I'm like, what do the pads do? How do I put them on? You know what I'm saying? I got like lineman pads and, like all this crazy stuff. And I'm at safety playing and just trying to figure out the game, right? And again, Glenville is a school known for football and track. Like, we have dudes every year who sign Division I scholarship. I mean, for a long time, they had a pipeline to Ohio State. Troy Smith won the Heisman. Ted Ginn was a notable receiver. Dante Whitner. I mean, the list goes on. This was my generation, obviously, but the list goes on year after year after year. And I'm on this team, right? I'm in practice with these guys. Like, these guys are not slouches. They're hitters.
Elite,
you know what I mean?
They're elite athletes.
Right? They're elite, right?
Like football and track and field. You heard about those guys. Those guys were like in magazines and everything.
Exactly.
Name it. Those guys were at the elite level in their sport.
Exactly. Army All-Americans, you know what I mean? 1 or 2 every year, right? So I'm in there and I'm trying to figure out how, like my shoulders are killing me, like my head is killing me. I'm not going to quit though. So I get on there and I learn. I'm just trying to keep it all in front of me. I end up starting a couple, like half the season. And that was my first experience with football. And outside of that, I end up getting 2 off. Now I'll go on recruiting visits with Ted, you know what I'm saying, with those guys. So I'm like, we're going to Power 5 institutions and stuff like that, but I'm not the one being recruited. I got 3 offers. I got North Carolina A&T, mm-hmm. I got Navy, and I got Akron. Those are my 3 offers, right? And Akron wasn't even an offer if it wasn't for two of my teammates who were I kind of got parlayed into the deal. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. If you remember, Dante Cloud and Jamal Benjamin were the guys because they were supposed to go to Ohio State or Cincinnati or somewhere bigger.
Good football
and
They're good football.
Right, they were ballers. And Coach Moorhead at the time, he had just got, remember that Coach Brookhart got, they were new staff. Moorhead had come from Georgetown to, I believe, and then Moorhead came from Pitt. Oh, no, not Moorhead, but Brookhart came from Pitt. Yep. So they were already recruiting those guys. And I think Moorhead may have looked at some film because I was like a Georgetown, I was like a 1AA D2 type of player at best, you know what I mean? And he was like, yeah, we could take him. Like, let's just, so that those two guys don't go to a bigger school, let's take them.
Yeah, no.
So I got the offer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good, man. That's crazy just how the journey goes. Like, originally you going into Glenville, you start out in the marching band. Before you know it, your senior year, you playing safety with some All-Americans. But you talked a little bit about Ted Ginn Jr. What was your experience like playing with him as a teammate?
Oh man, it was awesome, man. It was one of those situations where you see, like, I'll say to this day, he was the fastest person I've ever seen run. And it was effortless. Like, it seemed effortless. Like, I don't know what he was feeling, but I've seen that dude run a 45 in high school. I've seen that dude, like, I don't know if I've ever seen him run full speed. Like, that's the crazy thing about it. It always seems like he runs out of real estate before, you know, he reaches top speed. So to this day, I mean, I don't think anybody's faster than him, because it just so happened that the field is only 100 yards, because it should be longer for him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he is one of the most explosive guys I've ever seen on a football field. And he's probably playing in his 13th or 14th season at this point. I mean, he's been playing a long time. He has a lot of mileage on his body. And the thing that's unique about him is that every team that he goes to, they fit him in the scheme, and he ends up making some big plays for him down the stretch. So
right, exactly. Yeah, you don't hear a lot about him, you know, issues off the field. At least, you know, to us, we're fans. You know, I don't hear a lot about him, and you know, he clearly still has value and elite speed and things that you just can't buy. You know, you can't recruit or draft. You know, he still has that, and I think that's the reason why. It's because he has legit speed there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's unique about Glenville is that you played with Ted Ginn Jr., but Ted Ginn Sr. was the head coach.
Yeah,
playing under his leadership.
Yeah, so it was good, man. I mean, he's like a father figure, you know what I mean? And I was fortunate. I've been fortunate to have a father in my life who we're best friends, but not everybody in the neighborhood has that. And, you know, so he has adopted, you know, hundreds of young men and taken them under their wing and tried to give them an opportunity and just increase their quality of life. So, you know, part of Ginn's program is to highlight your ability on the field and or on the track. And even not just Glenville, though, all over the city of Cleveland. He has guys that he'll connect with scout or recruiters on the college level and say, hey, you need to pick this guy up. He's a good receiver. He's a good DB or something like that. And that's just his role. Like, he's the one who will provide you with an opportunity. Now, what you do with that opportunity, that's where, you know, it's up to you as a man. But he has spent his entire life mentoring young men and getting them to the point where they can create an opportunity for them and their families. So it's good. I mean, he taught me the sport of football. He allowed me to flourish in track. I mean, by my senior year, I was an All-American. I was running some respectable times, you know, had some looks in the track. And he, even with me having a dad, a good father, I could still go back and talk to him, and he can tell me about life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you talk about your senior year running respectable times. I would say they're a lot more than respectable. So in the 200, you ran a 21.4. Yep. You ran a 46.8 in the 400. You got All-America honors. What type of preparation went in that offseason to prepare to operate at a level like you did that year?
Yeah, so obviously by my senior year, I had 2 years prior experience running against elite talent. So I knew, like, I was fortunate to be able to run with guys who were already running 45. So I knew what it looked like. I knew what it felt like to get chased down by those guys. But my dad and I, and this is one thing nobody really knows, but my dad and I used to go out at, 6, 7 in the morning on Saturdays and repeat 800s, repeat 600s, repeat miles and to get my body stronger as I was developing. And there was one day where, I mean, it would kill me. And sometimes I'd be like, I quit, I can't do it. And my dad's just ruthless. You know what I mean? Just throw your cleats away then if you're gonna quit, just like a father would, push me. And there was one Saturday where, man, I was on like my third 800. By that time, I'm running like 2:45, 3 minute. I'm just jogging it. And I end up going out there, and I think on my third or fourth one, I end up running like 2:20, 2:15. Now, that was my third. Had already run several prior.
Right.
And that was the moment where I realized, okay, like, I think I got this down. Like, I knew what my body can endure. And I felt like just a flip switched in my head. And so that season, I went out there, and this is when we're like, we ran against Long Beach Poly. We ran against some Jersey teams. Dayton. Trotwood Madison at a Dayton was really good. They had a guy named Zach Logan who was like a bad dude. He was a monster on the track, and they had a good squad. It was like our rival, and I think that was when kind of a rivalry started with our squads. And I was like Pippen to Ted. Ted was Jordan. I became Pippen. You know what I'm saying? And he would bring, depending on the relay. Now, the 4x4 was obviously the keynote relay. I'm giving the stick to him, and I'm busting it open for that so that he can run his 45 and finish it off. And so that's kind of where we came from. I knew like my role on the team, but I think all of that, getting chased down as the rabbit and then not quitting, and then us, my dad and I going out there when everybody was asleep to work. I think that's what got me there, and that's what got me those times.
I mean, it seems like with your journey, especially through high school, was about hard work and dedication.
Yeah.
And you started to show that from an athletic standpoint, but you also showed that on an academic level as well. You were a member of the National Honor Society.
Mm-hmm.
You also were ranked 6th in your class academically. How did it make you feel to achieve those accomplishments academically?
It was good. On the other side of that, my dad pushed me in many ways, but the most underrated individual in my life has been my stepmom. She's from the Bronx, but she's the smartest person I know, and she has a tenacity to her, just a work ethic to her that I haven't even seen. Like, I only hear it, I would see it, but my dad tells me, And so when I first moved with them to Cleveland, she could tell there were, I had a potential there academically, but I didn't have the work ethic. You know what I'm saying? So I was focused, and I had no problem athletically trying to work hard, excelling, but academically I was lazy. And she called me out. She called me out on it, and she would never leave one stone unturned with me academically. And she's a Cornell grad, and coming from where she comes from the South Bronx, in extreme poverty, she there's not much you can use as an excuse for her. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, she definitely is the person who instilled academic values and hard work in me. And going to Glenville, you had the Cleveland Public School District is not the best. Just like any inner city school, that's U.S. education. That's why we do what we do, and we're trying to do our part in this. But we had some really talented individuals academically at that school. So to rank 6th in that school, it was a pleasure, it was an honor. And then trying to figure it out in college was a whole different ball of wax there.
Yeah, so let's talk about college. So you end up committing to the University of Akron. What made you make that decision to go to Akron? I know you had a couple of offers on the table from football, but you decided to go to Akron. What made you make the decision?
Well, I honestly wanted to go to North Carolina A&T. I thought, because I wanted to go to a HBCU. You know what I'm saying? And my dad was not having it because he felt like the value of a D1 scholarship was a lot more. My experience would be a lot more. Not that he has anything against HBCUs, but he knew that I had no idea the impact a Division I scholarship would have to compete at a high level and to have a, that just the different things that come with it, And so, quite frankly, my dad was like, "You're going to Akron. Like that's not up for discussion, And so, and I knew that I was going to have to compete regardless because I was still bad at football. It wasn't like it wasn't like I was out there. I was still a package deal. Let's not forget that. You know what I'm saying? So I went out there and I'm like, I could pick up the playbook. You know what I'm saying? I had no problem doing that. I just didn't know how to apply it to the field. I could draw the lines, I could, know what coverages meant what, but in terms of instinct and the things that you just get as you play longer, I didn't have any of that. I just was an athlete out there. So yeah, it was different. So that first camp, I don't know if you remember, Chuck, that first camp, I was actually getting some reps with the ones. Cause remember Dion was still kind of, we didn't know if I don't think the coaches knew if he was going to make it eligibility wise or not.
I remember.
And so, and there was Chris Brown, who was a freshman. He was in our class. Mm-hmm. And for a while there at corner and safety, I was kind of taking some reps with the ones. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, which Coach Flynn quickly realized was that he don't know. He's trash, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I'm like trying to pick it up, and I'm just not getting it. I don't even know how to hit the right way. Mm-hmm. And I'm clearly out of my league, you know what I'm saying? So, again, just like at Glenville, I'm last on the depth chart. I'm the slowest on the track. I'm not experienced athletically, so now I'm in the same position, similar position.
Yeah. So talk about like that first year. So you talked a little bit about camp and how that was going. Talk about that first year transferring and transitioning in to a Division I school.
Yeah.
You didn't go that far because you're going from Cleveland to Akron. But what was it like from an academic standpoint and an athletic standpoint, that transition in that first year?
Yeah, so what I thought I was really good at chemistry, like science and math. Like I was gonna be an engineer. So yeah, I come in, declare a major right off the bat as engineering, you know what I'm saying? I don't realize that all those years of chemistry at Glenville High School didn't prepare me for polymer science at University of Akron. Their program of distinction. This is what they're known for. And so I'm an engineering major, and it was like a different language to me. I did not understand any of it. And plus, I thought I was going to come in and be able to party and, do the things that, you want to do as a freshman, experience college and still be successful. So academically, I was terrible. I ended with a 1.6 my first semester. Brookhart said, "You're not running track." I thought I was going to come and run track at Akron. I ran in like a couple meets, and he was like, "No, you can't even handle this stuff academically, so you can't do any of that. You need to get it together." So then, as someone who's like, "Oh, you're against me," you know what I'm saying? I'm young, I'm dumb. So I'm thinking Brookhart doesn't, he's against me. So I'm like, still trying to do the same stuff. So second semester, I did a little better. I got out of engineering, did a little better. But at that point, I'm digging myself out of a hole from trying to be in engineering. So, of course, what's the natural progression from being an engineer is being business. Right. Got to be a finance major. But I for some reason, I didn't realize that I'm not good at math. I'm not. So for the second semester in a row, I'm like 1920. So again, for the second semester, I'm trying to make it academically. You know what I mean? And quite frankly, I haven't really applied myself like I know I should.
Right.
And frustrated with not getting on the field. I'm like last on the depth chart. I'm getting, I'm clearly being out recruited, because new guys are coming in and starting out. Fortunately though, we had Hickson. We had guys in that meeting room. We had yourself. Chuck Lou. You kind of put me under your wing, and you could probably tell I was a knucklehead. You know what I'm saying? But we had some dudes on that team who were like, they clicked Kiki, like he clearly cared. That were like, yeah, you a knucklehead, but you still, like you can get it together. Like still stay focused. And so, I remember having talks with y'all, and it was just like, yeah, but man, just talking about the issue and trying to sift through it and all that.
Yeah. So you actually did end up getting it together. Your junior year, you cracked the starting lineup. You get a lot of playing time that year. What type of preparation went into that offseason to get to that point where you were a major contributor?
Yeah, so really, I have to attribute a lot of it to Luke Getsy. I mean, he was our quarterback at the time, obviously very talented, very smart, won the MAC championship. We did a lot with that guy, man. It was an awesome experience. But he was the one that was like, snap out of it. Stop playing, stop trying to be a victim all the time, and you take ownership of it. And with him, he's trying to get better. He's calling me as like, let's go run routes, let's go throw. And I'm like out there every day with Luke, and sometimes it's just me and him. And he's teaching me the signals. He's teaching me the offense. He's teaching me how to understand, my place and how to read coverages and all the things that by that time I was obviously a receiver. And he's just talking to me. He's just like not using anything that I've been through as an excuse. Plus, he's getting himself better because at the least I'm a target for him, so that he can be a better quarterback. So really, I mean, he was the one to force me to get out there and catch balls and do the extra work, so that I can take ownership. So whatever happened, I can say I gave it my best shot. At the end of the day, I learned the game, I learned the position, and nobody can take that away from me.
Nah, that's all good stuff. And academically, you turned it on as well. You were able to graduate after your junior season. You had 1 year of eligibility left, but then you decided to leave and go to Eastern Kentucky. Why did you make the decision to leave?
Yeah, so I didn't know where I was as far as my graduation timeline. I had changed my major like 4 times over the course of my years at Akron. And I'm thinking like, I'm just going to ride it out. At that point, I didn't even know if I was going to play. Like I had, cracked the starting lineup. I ended up starting most of my senior year or the year before I transferred. But I was on the other side of Jabari Arthur. He's the man. Like he broke the record in the MAC championship. Like he's the guy. So, I'm not even Pippen. I'm like, it's like LeBron and like Mo Williams. You know what I'm saying? Like they're just role players, But I was able to, Eric Coleman, he was the one who sat me down and was like, hey, you can graduate this summer if you take such a, X amount of hours. And I'm like, what? No, I didn't know that. So I'm like, yes, let's do it. So it really wasn't until that spring before the summer that I graduated where he set me down and like, all you have to do is X, Y, and Z to graduate. So I'm like, let's do it. Yeah. And I actually set up an internship with WZIP because I wanted to be on the radio, TV stuff through that comm program, right? And I set up, I don't know, Terrence J, was that his name or something like that?
J.
One of those guys who was already on the radio. He was a fan of football, and he was like, man, we love to have you. So I was going to do an internship and try to get some experience and then maybe go to Cleveland and do local stuff. But throughout the summer, I finished up. I ended up repeating the chemistry class, and that's a whole nother. But I worked so hard at that D. But I tell you what, I never studied so hard in my life. But I ended up passing everything. And a month before summer school ended, a high school coach reached out to me. High school assistant coach reached out to me and was like, hey, he's an alum of Eastern Kentucky. And he was like, East Kentucky University. And a guy named Antoine Molden had went there already. He was a transfer at Glenville. He had went there and actually got drafted. Ended up playing for the Patriots for a while. But he was like, they may have a couple receiver spots open, a couple scholarship spots open if you're interested in maybe transferring. You're about to graduate. I'm like, nah, I'm cool. I'm just going to ride it out. Like, just, take random classes my last year. And he's like, well, you can start your master's degree. You can do this. I'm like, man, master's degree? I didn't even like my undergrad. I'm definitely not going to get a master's. I'm just going to ride it out. Like, I'm cool with where I'm at. You know what I mean? It is what it is. So he said, all right, cool. So then he calls me back like 2 weeks later. Now, keep in mind, 2 weeks later, now we're talking about 2 weeks before the start of camp at Akron. And he's like, hey, those 2 spots, they have 2 scholarship spots open. And I've talked you up. One of them is yours if you want it. And I'm like, man, like he really pushing it. So I called my dad and like, hey, have to talk to Coach Anderson. This is what he's saying. And it was like the biggest decision because you don't know what's on the other side and you've been so used to one thing. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I was like, okay, let me just enjoy my last season. I don't really care about playing or anything like that, but my dad convinced me that there is value in starting a master's degree, right? As long as you can get in, start a master's degree, and then you can parlay that opportunity, parlay that into another opportunity. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I had never been to Eastern Kentucky University. I had never been to Richmond. I had never been to Lexington, which is like the major city on the way to Richmond. I don't even think I had been to Kentucky other than going to Cincinnati and like going out across the bridge, right? So my dad and I took a U-Haul, and this is a week before camp now, took a U-Haul, all my stuff in my apartment. I stayed in Cuyahoga Falls, all my apartment and all my stuff in my apartment. We drove down to Eastern Kentucky University, and it was like, where are we, man? I think the mascot is even like, it's a colonel, but it looks like, oh, man, what am I doing, man? What's going on? So I get down there, I get settled in. I actually, and nobody knows this, I actually moved into the dorms. I didn't even get an apartment. I had enough money stacked up to just stay in a apartment by campus housing by myself, which was essentially a dorm. So I'm in the dorms. I'm a grad transfer in the dorms with like freshman and sophomore, but it was one of the nicest dorms just built. And I'm like, I'll just do this because it's cheaper to try to get an apartment, sign a lease and all that. Cause I'm not going to be here for that long. I don't plan on being here. So, and actually side note too, when Coach Brookhart found out that I was transferring, he threw a fit. He was like, well, I don't see why you need to go. We need to sign your release. You could just transfer and just go to school. And I'm like, well, I should be able to like at least enjoy my last season. And I gave y'all 4 years. Like just,
graduated too. You graduated?
Yeah, I graduated. Like I know my time here wasn't the most sterling. Like I don't, but I get it. But at least give me this, sign my release so I can try to go play somewhere. I'm not going to another MAC school. Like I'm going down a level. We won't see each other. Like it's all good.
Yeah.
And so he finally signed my release. I had to pay summer school back. I had to pay I had to pay at least a portion. I don't know if it was full or portion, but I had been saving money, right? Because Chuck Lou, Kiki, those guys taught me how to, hey, save that. Don't go out every weekend, that type of stuff. So I was saving. I had a couple stacks saved up. So I was able to pay off that, move down to Kentucky, and then have a spot down there and still have money in the bank without incurring any debt or anything like that. So it was a pretty smooth transition. Now, the only time, like even my good closest friends at Akron didn't even know. Like B-Dub, he didn't know. J-Long didn't know. J-Long transferred at that time, but DK didn't know. Doug didn't know. And those were my guys because it was one, how it is transferring. Bro, I look back, I might have been the first ever grad transfer. I don't know. I look back now.
Yeah,
it wasn't like.
I think when you did that, I was still a graduate assistant. So I wasn't fully in the mix yet. And that was like the first time I actually saw it done. And it was a learning experience for me because I was like, oh, yeah, like, so if you graduate, all bets are off. You can move on to your next school and everything. As long as they sign your release.
That's right.
And since then, that was that had to be 2008, maybe 2007, sometime like that.
Yep.
When you did that, so you're talking about 13 some odd years ago. Yeah. And that probably was one of the first times that was actually done successfully.
Yeah, I remember, man, because it was like, I think it was just one of those things where everything lined up. Like I had Coleman, I had you, like it just like everything lined up where like you guys were, supporting me, kind of guiding me through the process. I had already had great mentorship, like as I got more mature. You and I feel like you and I got a little closer as I got older, and you were a GA and like breaking into the industry. And I just, it didn't become about playing time in football anymore, but rather like what's most important. You know what I mean? And so it was all set up to make a decision like that. You know what I mean? Where now you're making a grown man decision to now think about your future 5 and 10 years from now, how you're going to do it. And I still at that time didn't know how football was going to turn out at EKU. Like I was considered a captain, like I was considered one of those guys who was going to play significant time at Akron.
Right.
So I was like, this is a breakout season. If you want to call it what it is, it was going to be a breakout season. So to leave didn't make much sense to everybody else, but it wasn't about the season. You know what I mean? It was about 2, 3, 5 years from now, what's going to happen? What's my plan? And so that's what went into the decision.
Well, I think you made a really good decision. You end up having a really good year at Eastern Kentucky that leads you to getting picked up as a free agent by the New Orleans Saints. Yeah. What was that experience in the NFL, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, man. So again, man, I had a great time at EKU. That is one of the best kept secrets. That university is they take care of their students. They have it's a college atmosphere, college town. So you know how the Rubber Bowl was. Like it was Division I, but we're not filling the stadium.
Right.
But the first game at Eastern Kentucky, it was packed. It was sold out, and they go out and they support you. So after that season, I had a decent season, and I ended up. So Coach Tressel, who was a former coach at Ohio State, who recruited our high school heavily. It was the time where if you're not invited to the combine in Indy, you can reach out to a college in your region or something like that. And I believe I was somehow Coach Tress was able to allow me to do my combine at Ohio State, which everybody knows you got all the scouts and more GMs and everybody at Ohio State.
Which, by the way, is rare because most big schools don't want anybody else coming in that can take away shine from their student athletes that go there. So that's big that Coach Tressel did that.
Yeah, I mean that just says a lot about him too, as a man and as someone who has kept track of. And I wasn't even a part of his program, you know what I mean? But the respect that he has. So, and it just so happened also that year they had a high prospect in Malcolm Jenkins coming out, who ended up obviously getting picked up 13th overall to the Saints. And so every scout was out to see him. They also had Brian Hartline. They had Brian Robisky, who his dad, those were the receivers, and his dad, Brian Robisky's dad, was an NFL receiver coach. They had a quarterback. I think they even went to the national championship that year or something. That was one of those back-to-back years.
I think that was like they was at LSU or they played back-to-back years like that.
Right. So they had some guys, right? They had some prospects that the scouts were out to see. So it was a great opportunity for me to get exposure. You know what I mean? And before that, man, even after the season at EKU, I wasn't looking like I'm about to get drafted. Like I had one good year at a 1AA school, and it wasn't even like I was like breaking records. I was just there. I had the highest receiving, highest amount of catches and yards. But it was, and I was just having fun. I was just enjoying it. But anyway, I ended up giving my shot, and after that, after the combine, I ran some good numbers. I jumped, I bench pressed well, and ended up getting a couple workouts after that. And then on draft day, in draft day, you realize like nobody knows what's going to happen. Yeah. Legit, if you're not top 10, and really I would say even top 5, you don't know where you're going to land. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't know if I was a draft pick or not, and quickly realized that no, it's not a game. They pick guys that are going to fit their program, and you start to learn a little bit more how that process works over the course of our business, as we interact with scouts. But I ended up getting a call after the drive was over, like right after the drive was, Mr. Irrelevant, they call him. And then the Saints called me and say, have you been called by anybody? Have you been invited to camp or accepted a camp offer with anybody? And I'm like, no, I'm interested, right? So they fly me out. I'm in a room with 17 other receivers, and you got dudes on the team, you got guys who are veterans that are not even in it yet. They're like just doing their own thing. And you're competing, you know what I mean? You're competing. Like you realize quickly that hard work that, you guys, Chuck, you, Kiki, Luke, all you guys instilled in me when I was on scout team playing running back, you know what I mean? And Kiki was hit me upside my head, and Bullet, if you remember Bullet, and Chase Blackburn, you know what I mean? And all those guys were knocking me around. You start to understand why all of it was worth it.
Right.
And so I'm competing. I'm lining up one-on-one against draft picks, guys who are highly rated, and they're no better than me.
Right.
They're no better. You know what I'm saying? You realize I can do this. But you also realize it's a business. Right. And you're fighting, Stephon Fuqua, is fighting for one spot out of not just the receiving core, but all of the corners, all of the linemen, because it's nothing for a D lineman to run off on kick coverage instead of you. So it's all about a spot. You thought college was a business. NFL is even more of a business. You are a piece. Where do you fit in our scheme, in our system? And so if your body type is not what they generally get, if you're not positioned that we need, if you don't complement our salary cap or whatever it is business wise, then you're gonna get cut. You know what I mean? And so it just so happened that year was the year that the Saints won the Super Bowl. So I think they only drafted like 6 people. One of them was a punter. So they didn't need much going on, in terms of personnel. So that was my experience, man. It was good because I got to kind of seal the deal with my football career, and I could have went to Canada or Arena League. But at that point, I was like, I get it. I think it was a culmination of all the experiences athletically, or at least in football, that I went through.
So you get released from the Saints. So where are you at mentally just with football?
I think I'm like every former athlete fresh off the field. Like I still got it. You know what I mean? And then you realize, like after an experience like that, you realize like I'm actually good. You can't get validation from going up against Malcolm Jenkins every day in practice, and you beat him sometimes you don't. Like you guys are going at it, And I'm like, he a 13th pick. I can beat him. Yeah. So when you get released, you're like, man, like I still got an itch. I still want to play. And then football season comes around, and the first game, the kickoff, and you are not on the field where you have been for several, half a decade. This is what you've been doing. Yeah. And you're like, man, like my body feels different. I should be, I still got that football shell, and mentally you're like, I can still compete. But I think for me, I was able to put my energies other places. I was working, like at that time I got an internship in athletics, finishing my master's degree, and doing things like that, trying to make the most out of what opportunity I have in that situation.
Yeah, so you go back to Eastern Kentucky, and you talked about getting an opportunity to do that internship and then work on your master's. How did that all come about for you to get back in there?
Yeah, so I guess the one of the good things that came out of getting cut so early was that it was early enough that EKU had one GA spot open. Like I think somebody had they had already hired their GAs for that year, but one of the GAs backed out because they had got a full-time job somewhere or something. So they were looking for one person. And it just so happened that I had a great relationship with the advisor over there and the director of academics over there. And they said, well, if you're interested, like, and I think they even, they were even like asking me to do like a whole bunch of, some marketing stuff, game day, field, the person who's on the field calling the game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, nah, let me just focus on the academic piece because I don't really know how I'm gonna do in college. You know what I mean? I need to focus and just do my GA and finish my degree.
Yeah.
So, and I don't even know if you know this, right? So, but I gotta make some money, so I got my GA spot, so I got that stipend, but I'm like, I found me a little, one bedroom efficiency, $300 a month. I got an old raggedy car that can break down at any minute. So I'm like, man, I need some money to save up, because I'm not going to be in this situation. I'm trying to parlay this into a full-time gig, right? So it's so hard to find. So I go to the mall in Lexington, which is like 30 minutes away, 30 minutes from Richmond. And I go to the mall and just fill out applications at the mall. I mean, I'm going from like Macy's to the pretzel joint, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I filled out. So the only person that called me, the only store that called me was Coach.
Wow.
Like purses, Coach. Like they sell purses. Yeah. They called me. It was like, we do need somebody. And so, bro, I worked at Coach selling purses. Wow. Through like that first 10 months, right? Finishing my master's, I was a year away or so. In that first 10 months, I sold purses, bro. I was like, and that wasn't even for commission. It was just hourly. Like it was just straight up supplemental money.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, months ago, or it was 5 or 6 months ago, you were in training camp, with the New Orleans Saints. And then, 5 months later, you're back at EKU. You built some good relationships. You're back there getting your master's, working as a graduate assistant. But then there's the other side of being a graduate assistant. You don't get paid that much. So now you got to get a normal job. So now you're a normal civilian out trying to make ends meet. But you go on to have a successful career there, working in academic services. You end up working at Eastern Kentucky for 3 years. But then you get a job offer from the University of Cincinnati. You accept that job. Why did you decide to move on, and how did that come about for you?
Yeah, so I end up doing some. I had a pretty good situation at EKU. I ended up getting a full-time job as a campus advisor in criminal justice, and I did some other things too. So I was on like financial aid committee. Like at EKU, I really got a sense of how higher ed works. You know what I mean? Administration, how the organizational structure works, how decisions are made. And I had some really good coworkers. My boss was awesome. I had was a really good, comfortable place to work. And so, but I still wanted to give back in athletics, right? So I had, again, Coach Tressel. I reached out to him, sent him my resume and said, hey, if there's anything at Ohio State, I'm your guy, right? So he said, actually, I want to connect you with the rec center at Ohio State. And I'm telling this story because this is the reason why I even got an opportunity at Cincinnati. But so Coach Tress set up a full-blown campus interview, right, for me at Ohio State's rec center. Now, they didn't even have a job, but he wanted me to experience what it's like to go up for the day, go through a series of interviews, presentations, so that I can get better at that, right? So they didn't even have a job to offer me, but I went through that. And so while I was at Ohio State that day, I said, well, let me stop in their academic office, right? I'm going to stop in. I got my shirt and tie on, so I'm good. Got some resumes and all that stuff. I think I had some cards. And so I show up to SASO, their academic unit, and I had already done some research, looked up Dr. David Graham. And I said, I went to the front desk lady and said, hey, my name is Stephon Fuqua. I would like to speak with Dr. Graham. I don't have an appointment, but I just wanted to introduce myself and maybe leave my resume. Wow. He happened to be there in his office, so he brought me back, and I gave him my 30-second elevator speech. You know what I mean? I had no idea who he was. And he said, wow, like, I'm impressed. Like, let's keep in touch. Again, I don't have anything for you right now, but in the future, let's keep in touch. And I was like, cool. So I left Columbus without a job. I'm like, man, shoot, I can't, you know.
Yeah.
So I go back. I think I work at coach that day or something like that. But anyway, so now I was done with coach by that time. But anyway, so I'm applying for jobs. I'm trying to get in athletics.
Mm-hmm.
I had a campus interview at NC State for like a tutor coordinator. Didn't get it. And then I applied. And so by that time, it was like July, August. And I'm like, man, I'm done. I'm just going to lock in at EKU and just make the most of my situation, right? Yeah. So David Graham called my phone. He says, hey, man, there's an opportunity at Cincinnati I think you should look at. And I'm like, man, like, I don't know. Like, I'm so tired of rejection. Yeah. I don't know if I can do it anymore, right?
You got rejection with football. You got rejection with, like, the higher education. You've been going on interview, knowing you ain't going to get the job or getting the experience. You heard no. And so now here goes another call. You're like, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know, bro. Like, I don't know. And I'm like, let me just – every fight doesn't have to be my fight. You know what I'm saying? I got a good situation. He's like, all right, I get it. Well, why don't you just apply? And then, you know, I know the director there, go through the interview, see. And if you don't like it, that's fine. It's cool. Yeah. I get it. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, cool. So I applied. I think a week later, I got an phone interview. That day, I think it was that day, the director at Cincinnati at the time texted me. It was like, or called me. It was like, hey, we want to bring you on a campus interview. We were just extremely impressed. I'm like, oh, I might have hit a lick right now. Like, well, let's go, right? So I'm back energized. So they brought me up, and it's a short hour and a half drive up to Cincinnati from Richmond, Kentucky. So I go up for the day, interview with the staff. They tell me, you know, you're going to work with men's basketball and track and field at the time. And I'm like, okay, cool. So, like, I'm a revenue sport. Like, I'm good. Like, this is good. And so I got the job offer, and I'm like ready to accept right before the semester starts. You know, I accept the job, and at the time I got a call so I accept the job, everything. I'm basically looking for places and all that stuff. I'm in a process of moving. I get a call from the SWA, who oversees academics. You know, it's like one layer up on exec staff. And she says, hey, like, I know you accepted the job. Everything is good to go. We just want you to know that the director at the time, we've put him on administrative leave.
Wow.
I'm like,
wow.
All right. Like, you know me, I'm green. I'm like 24 years old.
Yeah.
This is my first job in athletics. I don't really care. Like, you know, sounds good. Like, I hope, you know, he's not on administrative leave at some point, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know what that really means. So I'm like, all right, cool. Like, and she was trying to get from me if I was still interested in the job. I'm like, yeah, of course. Don't worry about that. So, right. So I move up there. I start, and maybe like, this is like September by this time, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks after I start, we have a staff meeting. The AD comes down and says, hey, just so you know, such and such, who's the SWA, who oversaw academics, she's been put on administrative leave. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hold on. Like, so who do I report to then? Like, and keep in mind, before me, I don't think they had an academic advisor for basketball that the coach didn't hire.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not reporting to coach. There's absolutely no academic culture, and it's fresh off the Xavier fight. Right? If you remember, like that, they fought Xavier on the court. Those were my dudes, right? Those are the dudes I'm working with, right? And or at least the ones who didn't get kicked off the team. And so I'm like trying to and listen, I don't have any experience working with a revenue sport. I just know that I'm gonna work harder than everybody around me, but I don't know the detail of it, the day-to-day. I'm still trying to figure it out. So I'm reaching out to people in the business, like people I know that can help me with that. And I didn't have a boss for like 2 months. So reporting and all that stuff. And we had some issues internally that I felt like needed to be reported with, there was a tutor that just worked with basketball. I'm like, I know right and wrong. Like, I know this is not seen right. But anyway, so then that's when they went through the search. Exec staff went through the search. AD meets with us again. And they say, hey, we're going to hire Joe Lucky. as the director. Now I only heard of him because at the time he was the N4A president, but I just like, man, that has to be a good hire because he's an N4A president. You know what I mean? And so now we got Joe Lucky on staff.
Yeah. So you talked about Joe Lucky, and so during your time at Cincinnati, what was it like working under his leadership?
Man, it's like you talk about a wealth of knowledge. Like, so first and foremost, me and Joe's first interaction, one of our first interactions, he brings me in, he's meeting one-on-one with the staff. And, you know, like any director, he's trying to get the lay of the land, you know, who's on his team, who's not, who's he trying to probably get out of there, who's not. So he meets with me. I have the other revenue sport, right? Football is obviously the priority at the time. Because he has, I think that's right after, I think that was still Butch Jones when he was still there. So, but there are some things they got to clean up in football. So he meets with me and say, hey, just, you know, tell me about yourself, get to know. He said, so I tell you right now, there's no way I would have hired you for this position. You shouldn't be here. And I'm like,
wow.
Did he know who where I'm from? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I'm from Cleveland. I had like, you know, I'm from Cleveland, man. What's wrong with you? Like, you don't know me? So he said, there's no way, I mean, you don't have any experience. This is not a job for someone fresh out, you know, it's not an entry-level job. I said, well, Dr. Lucky, with all due respect, I'm not like what you used to. I said, I'm gonna work harder than anybody that you've ever met. I said, I'm going to make new mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to make new mistakes. And there's nobody that's going to outwork me. Yeah. I said, I encourage you to challenge me as much as you can, but I'm here. I'm here to stay. Right. And so 5 years later, you know what I mean? We actually became good friends. We still talk to this day, but he taught me. I mean, he's one of those guys who he knows so much that you never feel like you know anything when you talk to him. You know, you never feel like you know you have it yet or something because he's been in it and he's, you know, I mean, this is his world and he's such a great person to learn from if you can.
Yeah, shout out to Joe Lucky, man, for being a guy that's been a veteran in the field for years. He's been over 20 plus years. And has been a guy too, man, that stayed true to his roots. You know, he hasn't been at a bunch of different schools. He's a guy that's been at schools. I think at Memphis, he was there for about 10 years. And then I think that the previous school that he was at before that, he was there for 10 years as well. So he's a guy that's willing to come in, start from scratch, build a foundation and stick it out, which you don't see in most directors. So shout out to him. So you spend 5 years with the Bearcats. But then you decide to take another opportunity at the Ohio State University. What went into that decision for you to leave Cincinnati to go to Ohio State? And then talk about what that transition was like going from Cincinnati, which is like a middle-level Division I school, not mid-major, but a step above it, but going to a Power 5 school like an elite school like Ohio State.
Yeah, so the opportunity came up actually after my first year at Cincinnati. David Graham, who had become a mentor of mine, the head football counselor position was open, and he called me. He was like, hey, I want you to have this job. Now, I'm like, Dr. Graham, there's one thing I've learned since being in Cincinnati is that I don't know anything. So, you know, I'm learning, you know, so I'm like, I want to give it a shot here. We had just got Joe. I wanted to make sure I learned under him. Like I didn't, you know, I wanted to see it through. And so 5 years later, the same job came up, and I didn't get the call like I did the first time. I called David. I was like, hey, you got this job open? Like, what's going on? He's like, well, we got an internal candidate who's interested. She's been around the program for quite a while. So I encourage you to apply, but you'll be applying, I mean, you'll be interviewing against her. Went through the interview process, didn't get the gig, but he said, we want to still bring you on as a counselor, but we're going to, you know, and I said, okay, but like, I want to, my salary X, like I want to make sure that it's worth the move because essentially it was a step down in title, or I guess it would have been just been a step down in title. And so it really only benefited me financially at the time, but then also I knew that I wanted to get experience working in football. And what better place to do it than Ohio State, right? So I was like, okay, I'll do it. I took the job, and it was exactly what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it was positive, but it was exactly what I needed at the time. So I'll say this. Everything you can possibly experience in college athletics, I probably experienced it working in those 2 years with Ohio State football. So that's why. I mean, that was the experience I was looking for, and I got it whether I liked it or not.
Yeah. So during your time at Ohio State, you got a chance to work with Urban Meyer.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like for you?
Oh man, again, it was all a part of it. I mean, it was all a part of getting that kick in the face with big time football. I mean, Urban is a guy who is very meticulous. There's a psychological part of it that you have to come with your A game every single time you interact with them, which can be positive and negative, depending on how you look at it. For me, I thought it was positive because I had to be sharp at all times. Now, my stress level was off the charts, but you know what I'm saying, it prepared me for anything that was to come my way.
Right.
It would prepare me for everything. So all credit to Coach Meyer for that. Thank you.
All that stuff is good. So you then decide to take your career to the next level. You accept the job as Assistant Athletic Director for Academic Services position at the University of Illinois. How did that all come about? You got some experience at Cincinnati. You worked at Ohio State working with the football program, and then now you're taking the next step more in a leadership role at Illinois. How did that all come about for you?
Yeah, so I wasn't looking. I mean, I was locked in at O State. There was some opportunity to advance. We had got a new director in Derek Coward, and he was looking to use me in some different ways. But ironically, Merce Poindexter, who we played ball with at Akron,
shout out to Merce Poindexter.
Shout out to Merce, who was at Tennessee. Is at Tennessee right now. A guy he worked with, Brian Russell, got the job at Illinois, and so. If you ask Brian, if you ask B. Russ, it was his goal to bring Merce over, kind of build a dynasty there, with him. And Merce, he started a family. He got used to it. And there were some opportunities at Tennessee that B. Russ was like, all right, since you don't want to come, who should I reach out to? Who's a good, solid number two that will work with me? And Merce and Marshall Stewart, who's also at Tennessee, shout out to Marshall, they suggested me. So I got a call one night. I got a text one night from Merce saying, hey, there may be an opportunity at Illinois. B. Russ, you may know him. He's going to give you a call if you're interested, right? And I said, yeah, I mean, I'll talk to him. I'm not really, looking, but I'll talk to him. I remember B. Russ from a couple N4As ago. We played basketball together, and I knew he could hoop. So I was like, he's got to be okay, right? Since he can play ball,
good, yeah.
Right? He can't be that bad. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's talk. It's an interesting situation. So as soon as I talked to B. Russ, and if you ever talk to him, you know why, because he's so charismatic. He has such a great personality. Man, he could sell anything, and he sold Illinois to me in a way that everything matched up. So shout out to B. Russ. He's been a great boss, great mentor. Because when he brought me on campus, again, it's like that trip to Richmond, Kentucky. I had never been to Champaign, Illinois, and I'm like, Illinois? I don't know anything about it. But hey, the opportunity, it was like, wow, this is a great place to be. It seems like a great place to be. So, he gave me the 5-star treatment when I came and really sold it.
No, that's good. So talk about your current role now within the department and how your day-to-day job is and operates.
Yeah, so again, I'm Assistant Athletic Director over Academic Services, which basically means that I oversee all of our learning services and academic counseling aspect of academic services and student athlete development. So while B. Russ is Associate AD, I oversee all the counselors and learning specialists in the operation. And then I also work directly with men's basketball and football. So I lead football unit. So we have, we have enough staff in football that we're able to manage, and I'm able to manage basketball as well. So that's essentially at the basic level what I'm doing.
No, that's good. So in the midst of that, in 2019, you just starting out there at Illinois, you earned your doctorate degree.
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel to achieve that?
Man, I tell you what, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, to get a doctorate. And and it's only because it's like it's just you. Like there's no team, there's no relay. You know what I mean? It's you and the computer. Is it difficult to write a paper? Is it difficult to balance it? Not really, but you learn a lot about yourself and your tenacity when you go through a PhD program. And to think about coming from a 1.6 my first year at Akron to a master's degree to a PhD, having a son in the meantime, like, my son was born when I got accepted into the program. So it was just like a culmination, man. It was one of those where it was such an emotional experience because it was just as much about the PhD that it was about the journey to get to where I ended up, where first time college grad in the family, to, excelling in so many different areas where I'm not one to speak on it. It's the first time you've given me the platform to speak on it. And ironically, you've been a huge part of that, of that success, because I feel like without you and guys like you, I wouldn't have been here. So it was a great accomplishment. I still don't, expect anybody to call me doctor or anything like that, but it was definitely an accomplishment, man.
Nah, I think that's huge to get your bachelor's degree, but then to go on and get your master's degree is an accomplishment. But then to get your doctorate degree, that's less than 1% of people in the world. You're actually in the Hall of Fame of education. If you think about it, that's the Hall of Fame, because you can't go any higher. There's no more school left, other than just you learning on your day-to-day job and your career.
Mm-hmm.
So you earned your doctorate. You're in a leadership role, overseeing staff. What is your leadership style?
I would say I can tell you that I feel like I take pride in having structure. I think, and personally, I have to have some type of structure in my life anyway, right? So I have to understand policy. I have to understand how things work. I've been like that my entire life, but I feel like I'm also very empathetic and compassionate, because I don't think you can be a leader without having those two attributes. You have to understand that people come from different areas, have different experiences, come from different backgrounds, which shape the way they think and the way they work. And obviously, as a leader, you can't do your job without your team. It's impossible, right? You can't. It's impossible to do. So, to get to know people and how they operate and how to best highlight their skill sets is kind of what I like to do. It's like my passion, because I think after that, once you get that out of a person, you can it's just like a coach. You get a coach who's like that, you can run through a wall with that coach, and so I would say that's kind of how I approach leadership and working with folks.
And I think the good thing that makes that valid is you've been through it. You've been a graduate assistant, you've been an academic counselor, you've been a senior academic counselor, you've been in that middle level role of management, you work with basketball, you worked with football at the highest of level, don't get no higher than Ohio State. And then you transition over to another Big Ten institution, and now you're leading individuals in the field. So I think you have the background to continue to execute that style of leadership. And so that's great. So we're going to move into the last segment of the show. It's called the top 5 segment. So I'm going to give you some subject areas, and then you give me your top 5 in those areas. All right.
Okay.
So we're going to start out with the first question. Give me your top 5 wide receivers of all time.
Okay. Top 5 wide receivers. I would say Steve Smith.
Okay.
Anybody who's 6 foot or under and dominates the game like him, you got to be in the top 5.
Yep.
Obviously, I think Fitzgerald has to be in the top 5.
Yep.
And Terrell Owens, I think he's in the top 5. Obviously, I think the top 2 can go hand in hand. Randy Moss and Jerry Rice. I mean, those are my top 5 receivers.
Yeah.
There's a long list, but I think those are the 2 toughest receivers ever. Yes,
Oh yeah, I mean, you talk about Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, Terrell. I mean, those guys are in anybody's top 5.
Yeah.
Interview 20 people, and then Steve
Mm-hmm.
Smith and Fitzgerald. I mean, they're right in the mix too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe pound for pound the best. As far as size and toughness,
Right.
and longevity.
Right.
So my next question is, give me your top 5 NBA players of all time.
Oh, top 5 NBA. All right, I'm gonna start with 5, and I hate to do this, but because it's really one. It's 5 ones. Like you can.
Yeah.
It's what I'm saying, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You got to put him in there.
Yep.
Got to put him in there, right? Magic. I think Magic, and that's a toss. It could be a toss up because I don't think people really know how tough Larry Bird was. You know what I'm saying? But I like Magic because he was the LeBron James-ish version of before LeBron, like a guy who can take over a game. You know what I mean? A guy he could just take over a game. So Kobe. And this is where obviously the debate is because there are 3 guys in the top, in the top that you could say are number 1. I'm a big LeBron fan, so I'm going to say Jordan is 2, LeBron is 1. See,
okay.
the issue, and I'll bring this up, I'll just say this one thing about this. When you have the greatest of all time that has to debate and really look at another guy, see, to me, if you want to compare 2 people, you have to compare Kobe and Jordan.
Right.
Because LeBron is on a different stratosphere.
Different
like
level.
He's on a different level. You can't compare him to Jordan, even though that's no disrespect to Jordan. But compare Kobe and Jordan. Don't compare LeBron to Jordan in terms of the greatest ever. Like LeBron can play in any era and dominate any team in any era.
Can guard all 5 positions and probably can play 4 to 5 positions and be an all-star. I agree with that list. All them guys are legends. So my next question is what are the top 5 places you've ever visited or vacationed?
So if you know me, I'm not a big traveler. I travel with my sports, obviously, but like I've never been out the country, so it's not exciting list, right? Like I've been to places that I think are cool, but I've never actually been to like Dubai, anything crazy like that. I don't like to fly, to be honest with you. But Austin's one of my all-time favorite places to be. Austin, Texas. I love that place. It's beautiful, clean. Gives you West Coast vibes, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Denver. My mother was raised in Denver, so she has a lot of family out there. I love Denver. It's beautiful. This past year I went to Tucson and Scottsdale for the first time, and I thought those places were beautiful. Like Scottsdale, if you want to go out and like have fun, but Tucson is a little more laid back. But I could take either of those places in Arizona.
Okay,
were beautiful. What is that? 4? I think that's 4.
Yeah.
3, 4. And I went to Providence, Rhode Island one time. And I was like,
okay.
I was like, this is beautiful out here. Now I don't know if I can live, but it was cool. It was a cool place to be.
Yeah.
I thought it was a cool place to be. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool, man. Especially Tucson. I heard Tucson is a really nice place to go, especially during the summertime. It's gonna be a little hot, but it's gonna be a good place. Mm-hmm. So my last question is, give me your top 5 movies of all time.
Ooh, top 5 movies. Ooh. That's a tough one. Malcolm X. Malcolm X is one of my top 5. I love Malcolm X. Spike Lee, you know what I mean? Shout out to Spike Lee. Man, it's hard not picking a top 5 without Spike Lee being involved in it. So I'll say, man, this is tough, Chuck.
So it don't even got to be your top 5. It could be just your favorite.
Just movies? Just movies?
Your favorite 5 movies, yep.
Wow. Man, anything with Denzel, Spike Lee.
All right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I hate to do that, to be very general. I also like Quentin Tarantino movies.
Mm-hmm.
big Quentin Tarantino fan. Even though like some of that, what's that? Dust Before Dawn was crazy movie, but I do like Django and Pulp Fiction. Like I like those movies too.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, anything. I'm one of those. Like I love crime mysteries.
Yeah.
But I also love a good Spike Lee movie and Quentin Tarantino if I'm feeling like it. So.
Nah, that's good, man. Well, we at the end of the show right now, man. First and foremost, I want to thank you for coming on to the show. You have an unbelievable journey, man, that you took us through today, and people are going to be inspired from everything from you not understanding how to play football or put your helmet on in your senior year to you going and putting your helmet on the right way and standing up tall with the New Orleans Saints and getting an opportunity to go to camp there to being able to accept that doctorate degree. Which is something that most of us will never, ever achieve, man. So I want to salute you, man, for your journey. And also a big part of this show is giving people their crown while they're alive. You're doing amazing work. Sometimes we just spotlight the A-list people, all the celebrities, whether it's athletes or whether it's superstars, but we never really spotlight the individuals that's out there making the same impact on a daily basis and doing some amazing things and then have an amazing story to go along with it. So I salute you, man. I thank you for coming on to the show and sharing your journey. And I appreciate all the work that you've done. And you haven't even hit your prime yet, man. So it's going to be great to see what comes in the future for you, man.
Man, thanks a lot, Chuck. I appreciate the opportunity too, man. This is a great experience to just talk about it. So I appreciate what you're doing too, man, the opportunity to talk to you.
For sure, man. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into your journey. Be safe and God bless.